Hi, I'm Joe Navarro, and welcome back to People Watching. Today I want to talk about primary responses. Now, sometimes they're referred to as autonomic responses. Some people call them automatic responses. Whatever your preference is, these are hardwired responses that evolved with us to, number one, keep us safe. And number two, to allow us to communicate to others how we're feeling at any one moment. Often you've heard people talk about the fight or flight response, and you've probably heard me say, well, that's kind of accurate. We actually evolved to freeze first, and then flight, and then fight. It is more behaviorally economical to freeze first. As I often say, 300,000 years ago, archaic humans, we were surrounded by predators at all times. We were all in Africa. There were hyenas, large tigers, lionesses, and all sorts of animals that wanted to bring us down. So we evolved to first freeze in place, to not move, because movement initiates the orientation reflex in large mammals. And so by holding still, two things took place. One, we could assess the environment around us. It helped us to listen to see if we could hear the prey. Maybe it was stalking us. And secondly, if we were in a group, and most of us usually were, we would be able to silently but effectively communicate to the others, stop. Something is not right. And so it's something that evolved with us. It's very efficacious, and it has actually protected us. And to this day, sometimes people will see a car coming and suddenly just freeze. And that may be the wrong thing to do, but it's so hardwired in us that it prevails. Now, the other thing that often happens, and it's rarely talked about, is that some mammals, and that includes humans, when something is heard or something is so shocking that people will actually faint. I've actually observed it during a criminal investigation where we were responding to a burglary, and the suspect never imagined that the alarm went off. And as we entered the building and the subject turned around and saw us, he literally froze and then fainted. So that is definitely a response. And again, it communicates, as all nonverbals do, to others around you that something shocking has just taken place. The other thing that often happens is when we hear or see something that is very troubling or very threatening, we will often touch our necks, cover our necks, and you've heard me talking about covering the suprasternal notch, which I've observed in many cultures anytime we feel threatened. So the neck covering is certainly one of those autonomic responses that we don't even think about. The other one is very interesting. You've seen it thousands of times. Is you'll see something shocking, or you're at a basketball game and you're down, your favorite team is down by 1 point, and you notice people covering their mouths, and they all seem to do it at once. Why? The why has to do with an evolutionary imperative to survive. And because we were surrounded by so many predators, we learned very quickly over time to cover our mouths. And this would prevent our breath from being broadcast. And at the same time, if people around me see me going like this, they then, through mimicry, would do the same so that we're not broadcasting to other animals our precise location. The other thing that you often see is as an autonomic response, and I've seen it many times, is when a suspect, for instance, is confronted with information and they begin to cover their head. And it happens also every day when somebody is told, hey, somebody just crashed into your car, and they put their hands over their head or they cover their head. we evolved to cover the head, protect the neck, again, as a very quick, almost reactive behavior to keep us safe and keep us alive. So these are behaviors that we don't think about. We don't think about touching our necks. We don't think about covering our faces, and yet we do. The next one, if we haven't fainted, so there's actually the 4 F's, right? Freeze, faint, flight, fight. The next one is the flight response you often hear about. And that has more to do with distancing. We may turn away from someone we don't like. We may see a situation and literally cross the street. That's considered flight. We may back up. I remember in Puerto Rico decades ago, heading back from a restaurant, a young man confronted us with a knife, and we sort of backed up automatically, even though there was some distance. The distance always helps you. You know, I would even consider nowadays, if somebody is a threat to you, let's say online, you ghost them, you delete them, you don't interact with them, and that is a form of modern flight. And of course, the fight response, which always is left as a last resort. Obviously, that fighting isn't always a guarantee of survival. Sometimes predators in ancient times and nowadays social predators have the means to hurt us, and you're left with no option than to defend yourself. But that is always obviously reserved for last. And then what happens after these autonomic responses? Usually what we experience is the need to self-soothe, to pacify ourselves, and that will be manifest by cathartic exhales, something like that, or running fingers through the hair, or massaging the face, or wringing of the hands as we deal now cognitively and physiologically with the stress that we just endured. And oftentimes you'll see people yawn after something stressful happens, and that usually happens because in yawning, the air quickly coming in hits the palate of the mouth, and it cools the air it cools the blood going into the brain. So we have these behaviors that help us to survive, and then we have these behaviors, autonomic also, to self-soothe, to calm yourself down. And if you're interested in pursuing this more, please take a look at what everybody is saying, which talks about this, and also the dictionary of body language. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for sharing your time.